started. Hopefully anybody else that joins can catch up and they join really soon. So I'm going to start recording this webinar and get started. So here we go. Okay. So today's webinar is focusing on how to automate citizen questions in the public sector using chatbots, but this also applies to the private sector. So I just wanted to make that clear that really we're talking about large organizations, institutions, and maybe the struggles that they face on the customer support side, but we're going to be particularly focusing on the public sector in this, and even more specifically government at the state level. So we'll go ahead and get started here. And all right, we'll start with introduction. So my name's Levi. I'm a consultant over here at TARS. And a little bit of background about me. I actually got started in chatbots just about 4 years ago. Yeah, right around 4 years ago. And I built the first chatbot system for the state of Montana. And it's actually one of the largest, still to this day, public-facing chatbot systems in U.S. government. So I have spent a lot of time focusing on customer support automation in the public sector specifically, because when I got started in my role as a public servant, I realized that it was just a place that we were lacking critically in our goal to serve citizens. So jumping to the next part. So who's TARS? Well, TARS is a couple different things, but today for this webinar, we help state and local government agencies scale services and customer support for their citizens using chatbots. Pretty straightforward. I'll go a little bit more into the actual platform itself as we kind of explore these different deployments, talk about what worked, what didn't work, strategies to scale and improve in the future. So basically, just to keep it really simple, we're a no-code drag and drop platform that anybody can use to build chatbots. Super easy, and really that's how I got started. Back 4 years ago, I was a state employee, stumbled across TARS. Now I consult here and help other people build solutions. And it was so easy that I went from not knowing what a chatbot was to building this massive system. We're going to take a little look at that actually today during this webinar. So first, I wanted to start, actually, before I get into the traditional channels of customer support, just give a quick outline to those new attendees that have joined us. So how this is going to be structured is we're going to look at traditional customer support channels, the pros and cons of them, and really break down what is going on with them and where the issues may be in those approaches. And then from there, I have 2 live deployments that I want to look at. And on each one of them, we're going to take a look at them live on their website. We're going to break down some features, some strategies behind those in the first place, and then talk about how they could be taken to the next level, either through scale or more personalized experiences or whatever it may be. That's what we're gonna talk about through this webinar. And then at the end, if there's time, I will actually take a little bit to show the back end of the platform. If not, we'll just go straight to questions, and we have tons of webinars out there covering this stuff. So feel free to check those out. One of my colleagues will drop a link to our overall webinar resource list. So now let's jump into it. Traditional channels for customer support. So traditionally, we're using human-based systems, and this is true not just for the public sector, but really just, the world. We're usually relying on call centers, more recently live chat, and before that, email was kind of the thing, right? So, but call centers definitely our biggest focus for human-based systems. And then we have text-based systems. So everybody has one. It's a web page, right? Static web page where you compile tons of information in a single area that users can wade through to find answers. That includes FAQs and very traditionally with the public sector, PDFs. So let's talk about the problem though with those traditional customer support channels. It's actually really simple. They cannot scale. They're either unengaging or they're incapable of rapidly scaling. And of course, 2020 taught us all this lesson. I know you guys don't even want to hear me say it, but it's the truth, right? So our call centers just could not scale to meet the demand of, in certain cases, millions of people trying to reach resources, trying to get an answer to something, unable to find it, clogging up the phone lines, sending just massive amounts of emails for that engaged response. And the reason being is because they couldn't find their answer anywhere else. They're having difficulties figuring out what the text-based customer support channels were trying to tell them, guide them. And so they clogged up the human base, and it was unable to scale to meet that demand. So that is the problem. I want to keep that in mind, framed through this whole webinar that we're talking really about engaging customers, citizens, and this is incredibly important when we're talking about text-based systems. If they're engaged, then they actually can find answers. We're going to talk about why that doesn't actually happen on websites, and also thinking about scaling. So this is like really the biggest problem that government has today, is the ability to scale. So they really need a page out of, right, startups. How do startups actually scale to go from 100 users to a million users in a rapid amount of time and be successful at it? So this is kind of the way to think about where we're going to go with this whole automating customer support journey. So let's break down the pros and cons of human-based customer support first, and talk about exactly where it works and why it doesn't work when we're talking about scale. So the good, hey, it's pretty straightforward, right? Just like right now, talking with somebody is engaging. It feels incredibly personalized. It's easy to do, and people can handle highly complex issues. So a really good customer service rep knows the ins and outs, the processes of the organization, and they're very skilled at understanding the needs of the customer, and then pivoting to either explain the specific steps they need, or deliver those resources and help them out. It's a very engaging experience, but there's a lot of bad that comes with them. And the biggest one, and this is, I mean, we're talking government here, it's always on the top of our heads, right? They're prohibitively expensive. And it's not just what you would normally think the cost would be. Even if you outsource, right, that cost is large. But if it's internal, you got payroll, HR, office space, training those employees to get to the place where they can actually handle complex issues. You just can't take anybody, put them into a role, and they'll be able to answer the customer question right off the bat. So there's a training phase, a workup phase. There's even an on the job, like getting better at it as they go, through answering a lot of calls, talking to a lot of customers. So there is a definite slow to scale even a single person into this engaging, beneficial roles that we looked at in the first slide. So, and then of course the intangible costs. Anybody that's ever even walked into a call center and experienced that work environment, and I'm sure there's good ones out there, so we're not knocking all call centers or anything like that, but from my experience in government call centers, it is incredibly stressful. Those employees' mental well-being is definitely at risk. And I personally just saw tons of turnover, right? And that each person that's a turnover folds us right back into that monetary cost. So now we have to go through the whole process of hiring a new person, training them, getting them up there. This is a very cyclical experience where they just keep losing employees. They move to something else, they transition, they leave entirely because they can't stand the stress of it. And then of course, the thing we're all struggling against in this world is wait times, right? So they suffer from long wait times. At the Montana DMV, where I worked in the public sector, there were times, and I was actually being kind of nice. I said, peak hours stretch support staff thin and customers drop off. That's you might be thinking like, what, 15 minutes hold time? Well, over there at the peak of the worst of it all, there were people waiting for 2 hours on the phone. I mean, it's insane, but literally there was just such a breakdown from the text based to the human based, and the amount of traffic trying to get in and get an answer was so overwhelming that they had 2 hour wait times at times. And again, with you combine all of these factors, there is exactly why you cannot rapidly scale human-based systems. It's just not possible. Even if you had all the money in the world, there's still a time delay for scale. So if tomorrow all hell breaks loose and there's a massive crisis, you do not have the ability to scale to that need. So but that doesn't mean to say that it cannot be scaled in ways, right? We cannot rapidly scale it, but you can scale your human-centric support or your human-based support by reducing unnecessary tasks and streamlining processes for your reps. So we're going to talk a little bit about what this looks like a little later down the line, but I just want to keep that in mind, that there is ways still to scale that experience, but you're going to need some tools. You're going to need some processes behind that help reduce those unnecessary tasks they have to do and streamline their internal processes. So let's look at a traditional customer support channel that can scale and do, again, the good and the bad behind it. And then we're going to jump into our live deployment. So it's obvious, right? It's your website. It's your text-based channel that can scale, because as long as your servers are good and your hosting's good, it could take millions of hits, and that's millions of people that get eyes on your information, your FAQs, your PDFs, whatever you have across all your pages, their eyes can see it. But let's talk about that. That's the good, right? The good is they solve the problem of scale by presenting all that information in one place. They're relatively cheap in comparison to when we're talking about a call center, because that's literally just people in chairs with tons of equipment, versus a website can be actually maintained by a very small webmaster team. They require minimal effort after they're set up to maintain. So very true in government, in my experience. A lot of websites actually just are a lot of text down a page, right? So the only adjustments made to those are changing wording here, adding a sentence there, very minimal. Almost anybody can do it without any website experience. So it is capable of being updated with minimal effort, and there's not much to those updates. And they're always available 24/7. One thing we didn't actually talk about on the call center side, right, is most call centers aren't 24/7, and to do so is very, very, very expensive. But especially for the public sector side, we don't have that luxury, right? It's basically 8 to 5, 9 to 5, somewhere in there is when those channels are open. And outside of that time frame, the users do not have much of a way of solving those queries. So they can either use some other, they can use that website. Maybe there's some email channels or a forum, but they're still not really getting a response. They're just queuing for when people come back, tomorrow or after the weekend, because we also don't have those support channels through the weekend as well. So it's a major amount of time that the support's not available, but the website always available. So let's talk about the bad. This is straight up. They are unengaging, especially traditional. I'm just going to say it. Traditional government websites are a ton of text down a page. And let's look at some straight facts about this. And this is on the private side, right? This isn't even the public sector. This is the private sector. So flashy websites with all the cool stuff. Users still spend less than 6 seconds looking at the website's written content. So if that's where our baseline is, and we have 7 seconds to attract that user's attention to the important thing that they're trying to find, we're going to fail, especially if there's a lot of text. Even if it is kind of organized okay, it's still going to be really hard for that person to pay attention, to even comprehend what they're reading. They're going to scan it. They're probably not going to find what they want. They're probably going to call your call center to get the answer. And of course, this really fun fact, and that's really what I was talking about right there, 40% of visitors will stop and get engaging with a text-heavy website. That means if they stop engaging, but we're the government, so we have to get the answer, they're going to pick up the phone. They're going to rely on those human-based systems. And once again, they can't scale. So we're in this cyclical customer support hell really. It just never ends, and that's how the citizens feel about it. They feel this way. They can't find their answers. They have to wait on hold, and the longer you wait on hold, that diminishes that engaging aspect of call centers. It just totally wipes it out. They don't care that they're being personally talked to and their issues are being solved if they had to wait 30 minutes to get there in the first place. So but let's talk a little bit about what that means. Like, so part of this webinar is a lot about strategy, right? So that's not to say that websites can't be better. They can't be optimized to be more engaging. So think about it this way, that in creating an engaging web experience requires repeated input from your visitor. And really it should be in the simplest way possible. So the more you can think about this like a bank, right? The more the user clicks or interacts with the website, actually makes decisions that affect the outcome of what they're doing, it's like they're depositing credit into that bank. And your bank is that information resource. So the more credit you get, the more the users, one, they're actually getting their problems, their questions solved, but they're enjoying that experience too, because they're actually engaged. They're actually adding something. It's like a transaction back and forth. So what if you could balance the best of both, engaging and scalable? Well, I'm here to say that chatbots actually, that's what they do. They scale engagement, right? So we have this cool little graphic. It's off the page, but that's okay. No worries. We have a traditional, and we didn't even talk about this, right? So I was assuming that websites are actually mobilely optimized. As you can see here, here's a great example of a city website where I grew up, just down the road. And you can't even read the text because it's not mobilely optimized. Can't even see it. But on the right, we have a chatbot that is built mobile first, right? So it's great on a mobile device, better than really anything that you can imagine. Taking your main website and squishing it down to mobile isn't actually, it may be mobilely optimized, but it's still not a great experience. It's still very unengaging because when a person has to sit there and scroll their phone and read tons of text and feel like they ran a marathon with their finger trying to just find one answer to their question, they don't enjoy that experience. So we're actually going to talk about this deployment over here a little bit, but we're going to look more at the inbound customer intake side. And actually that's where we're at. So I'll read this over here since you can't see it. So I switch there. This one says easy to read, bite-sized chunks. That just means not overwhelming the user with text, right? Very relevant, concise, specific text that they're getting in just bubbles, message bubbles, that ubiquitous interface of text messaging that we all absolutely understand and can relate to immediately. That's a big factor there, folks, is this is the biggest system that's out there, really. 6 billion active users per month are on text messaging apps. So everybody really that exists, almost the entire world can interact with text messaging. And then finally, it's user journey focused. So that means it's a personalized experience. Even if it's not incredibly personalized, where it's calling me by name, pulling information in, just the bare bones of a chatbot is more personalized than any other digital asset out there, because it's having a conversation with you. That is the experience that you feel through it. So we're going to take a look at 2 active deployments. Time's looking pretty good, so that's great. We're going to look at 2 active deployments. In each one, I'm going to look at the pros and cons. We're going to talk a little bit about it, and then discuss some strategies on how it could be improved or the next steps that really should be taken to grow these deployments and even find more value out of them than is already there. So the first one is actually a newer one. So this is probably going to perk up a lot of people because they love hearing about natural language processing. It's like a buzz term in government, and almost everybody I talk to on demo calls or just in general is like, so do you have NLP? Are you doing that natural language processing? So here's a great example for you. Missouri Secretary of State uses natural language processing to answer customer questions on their online portal. So this is a pretty straightforward thing, and it's actually, I hear this a lot, so it's pretty funny. It's actually happening in Montana, I'm pretty sure right now too. They launched a new business portal. There was issues, right? Software launches always have problems. That's just life. They seem to sometimes be a little more accentuated in the public sector. Not 100% sure why, but they seem to have that issue more often than not. And what happens, right, is you go as a business owner, you have to return every year to file for your business. I have to actually do it for one right now. I just got my email yesterday, and you are used to one system, one layout, and with its flaws and all, right? You understand how to navigate it, and you show up the next year, it's totally different. And you get frustrated very quickly. It's hard to understand what's going on, and you start picking up that phone, calling that phone call, sending an email. How do I log into this? Like, what's going on? Did the link change? Whatever it may be, right? There's all of these issues that could come from it. And that's exactly what happened to them. Their human-based support channels spiked. They couldn't keep up. They were really having a hard time keeping their call wait times down, answering the questions. And they found that they're really just answering a bunch of the same questions, about 10 repetitive questions over and over and over again. And so they were looking for a solution that could handle those repetitive questions and really try and do it in a way that just, deflected those calls from their call center, stopped the emails from coming in, gave their people a chance to take a breath and feel like they weren't overwhelmed every second of the day. So let's talk about how their deployment works. At the end of this, when we get to like strategies to consider, I'll actually jump out of this presentation, go do a quick search on it. It is new, so just be forewarned that if for some reason I say something too complex, it's like, what? It is a pretty new deployment. So these things, we'll talk about how NLP works and how it grows over time. But first, let's just talk about how it's actually deployed. So in the bottom right here, you can see the web page, and it's literally only in this place. So this is when you go to log in to file your annual report, and there's two boxes. Click here if you haven't logged in before this date since the new system went in, or click here if you've already done so, created an account or whatever. And this is it. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but they were still getting tons of issues, right? Tons of issues past this moment. So they deployed River, as they call it, their virtual assistant, to answer some of those basic queries that come in, like how to file, how to log in, things of that nature. And it is a floating widget in the bottom right corner. This is it opened, as you can see on the image. So the image has it opened here. And when it's not open, it's got this nice little image and a call out message that says, if you need help, click here and get started, right? So something of that nature. So every widget through TARS has this kind of floating widget option. You can add to any page on your website. In this case, they just added it here only. It's not anywhere else on their website. So just one place. And it can be opened up by the user when they click on it. So it's kind of passive in that sense. It's floating there. It's a tool they can use when they feel like using it. When it opens up, it explains how this process works, gives an example, and then says, please ask me a question, right? So that user can type out in their own words the question they have, and then we will now talk about how that NLP side of that works. So that's how it's structured, how it's presented to the user. Now we're going to talk about NLP structure and workflows. So when they ask that question, to what happens afterwards. So NLP is all about defining intents. Now, if you've never dealt with NLP or really looked into it, intents are basic. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right? It's like what the user intends to say. And um, that can be a lot of different things. It could be, why is the sky blue, right? That's the problem, the fundamental, I wouldn't say problem, but the disadvantage of NLP. People can say whatever they want. Nothing is saying that they're going to follow protocol and actually ask a relevant question to it. Additionally, they can say a whole paragraph of text, right? Like, um, tell you their whole life story and then put a question at the end. And it may struggle to deal with that massive amount of extraneous information it didn't need to hear in the first place. So there are some of those pitfalls to it. But basically how it works is there's 10 questions that they were getting repetitively. So those are the intents, right? They have these 10 intents: how to file online, how to log in, 10, a few others out there that were just constantly hitting their call center. So by defining that intent, we have a starting place, that trigger, so to speak, of when the user is looking for this, we need to deliver them there, right? So that's how intents work. This particular deployment, just to get to the bare bones of it, is using Google Dialogflow. Pretty fantastic tool out there. It's actually pretty much free for most people, unless you have really high volume, which is cool. So you can get standard queries to it without actually even having to pay for most instances. And then beyond that, it's ridiculously cheap, like 0.002 cents or something a query. It's low and reasonable. And so in that, there's actually training phrases. So you have your intent, and then you have your training phrases, and that's all the ways that a person could ask the same question. It's very simple. Dialogflow makes it really easy. There's other NLPs out there. They pretty much all do the same thing. And basically what it does, you add those training phrases, and it learns off of those through machine learning all the ways that it can fathom a person could ask this question similarly. And you can continue to add to that training set to grow it and make it even more and more powerful. So that's exactly what Missouri Secretary of State did. They set up their intents, they added their training phrases. Some of them were keywords, some of them were literally phrases, sentences that people have asked them that mean the same thing. And they've been working on growing that capability ever since. It's very easy to do, by the way. We'll talk a little bit about strategies on how to implement this quickly as well. But that is basically how the NLP side works. Then the workflow is essentially what happens after the NLP has determined what you're saying to it, where it's taking you, and then the workflows that happen after that. So in this deployment, it's pretty simple. There's not a lot of complex processes that they've worked into it, but it may be a single string of messages with a resource that they can then jump to, or it may explain the process to them. But it's not like taking you through 10 steps to solve a complex issue. Well, again, it's an early deployment. And when we talk about growing this is really where we're going to focus. So strategies to consider. First and foremost, when thinking about NLP, you really have to look at where those questions are coming from in the first place, your call centers. If you're not documenting your questions and you're not keeping a running list of the top queries you receive and the answer to those, you're already behind significantly. So you need to have these things going. So if this is day one, I don't care if it's a Word document, Excel spreadsheet, it doesn't matter. You need to start documenting these questions that are coming in. Now, most organizations can tell me their top 10 questions. When I ask them, they're like, yep, we got them right here. So this isn't a widespread problem, but if it is a problem now, it may be with cities or some state agencies, it needs to be documented, right? It needs to be put together, even if it's crude at first. You need this information. So that's where it starts. Some other places to look. This one's really easy, and most most webmasters that I know can pull you their search list, right? Their top 10. Go to the website. What are people searching for on your website? What are the top 10 things search for on your website? It's going to translate really well into why the top 10 reasons people call your call center, because they can't find those answers, right, on the website, or they have a hard time finding, like, sifting through all that information to find the answer. So, two simple strategies right there: your call center, and also your search on your website. They're going to give you really good ideas of where to start. Now, one strategy to consider, I don't necessarily like live chat because of its inability to scale, but it is also a great place to be collecting how a user would, text to those live chat channels, and then how you can respond to them. So also another good spot to find those questions as they come in, but again, not scalable. There has to be something before that that can deflect those customer queries. So let's just take a quick look. I'm gonna probably run out of time here, so I got about 10 more minutes to focus on the other deployment. So I'm gonna open this up. It's on their page, just like we were looking at, and I'm gonna take a second and search. I think I'm just gonna keep it pretty straightforward, right? I'm gonna say I'm having trouble logging in, and see what happens with this quick demo. So in my own words, I'm having trouble logging in. Let's see what happens. Hopefully good things. You never know with NLP. Okay, looks like you need help with an account. Is this correct? Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Yeah, logging into my account, I need help with that. So here we go. You can see the difference, right? So if this were like an FAQ, and I'd have to scroll through 20 FAQs to find the one that matched with what I needed, and then read through that text heavy block in the first place, it's not great. But here, they can actually deliver very specific, simple messages to the user. We've recently upgraded to a new enhanced filing system. With this new site, you have to create a new user account. All key information that is hard to find in that FAQ, and then they have an option to redirect to a step-by-step guide, right? To move this to the next step, or you can say no. Provide me with more account help options. So this is like just being completely honest. If I click yes here, it takes me to a PDF, and I don't like PDFs. They are not mobilely optimized. They're not mobile friendly. So if 50% of your mobile traffic uses this fantastic chatbot, has a great experience on it, and then clicks that button and goes to a PDF where they have to pinch their screen to try and read what's going on, you lost them. Like there it goes. It's a strategy that governments use a lot, but really what should be happening here is when I hit yes, the chatbot could literally step me step by step through the process in chat on page, and then I can go ahead and create that new account because I was just talked right through it, just as if I were on the phone with a customer support agent. And that's going to make sure that I don't call, I don't email. I am satisfied with my answer because it was right there for me, right when I needed it, on page, and a perfect execution. Okay, so back to our slides. We're going to look at one more live deployment, and then I'll open it up for questions. Looks like there's some already out there, which is great. I really encourage anybody and everybody ask questions. Let's talk through it. Okay, so now let's look at an inbound customer support solution, a fully automated one. And that is where I got my start. So the Montana DMV automated their entire customer support intake system using a chatbot called CAMI, which stands for Customer Assistance Management Interface. And yes, I came up with the acronym 100%. And CAMI is kind of an interesting story. I mean, it was literally born out of necessity. And also I had been building this chatbot system, and I codified essentially all the processes that you could do at the DMV through a chatbot, step you through pretty much everything that was out there. And I got to it and I was like, there's just something missing. And I couldn't put my finger on it at first until I finally realized that this was going to deflect calls to our customer support or to our call center, but we actually never had a way to accept online submissions at all. No forms. There was a few email addresses that floated around the website. That was it. And how that process worked, right? And this is key, right? This is one thing I tell everybody: know your processes. You need to know what your current process is and why it's not working. So the process was, there was like 4 or 5 emails. You would send your query to these pool emails, and then they would be forwarded around probably 3 to 4 times internally by the staff until the right person, it got in front of the right person. Like, hey, I think you would answer this. Oh no, that's Jim's job. Oh no, that's not my job. That's Jan's job. And then Jan would be like, oh yeah, I can answer this question. So think about the turnaround time with something like that, and how many people fall through the cracks and how many emails don't get answered. I mean, most of the employees had many unanswered emails just sitting in their inbox because the system was totally inefficient. And of course, that shoved all of the human-based support, the strain on their only human-based support, which was really just the call center. It pushed all of that pressure onto them. So let's look at how their deployment works. This is a little bit different. So there is a widget, as you can see in the bottom right, but the widget is actually that guided experience that steps people through any process that they want in the DMV. But you go to a very specific page to actually interact with CAMI. This was by design, right? Because not everybody necessarily wants to use a chatbot. This is just, reality, I guess. But the numbers off of this are about 50%. So that's way higher than most tools. Most people say like 10% are going to use this tool or that tool. This one actually has about 50%. That's both of them. So CAMI has about a 50% interaction rate to, submitting a query. And Ben, the other bot on this page, bot enhanced navigation, by the way, made that acronym too. He helps by, I just lost my train of thought, but he as well guides people and has about a 50% interaction rate. So 50% of those that jump, open that up and start interacting, go forward with it. So, and by the way, that translates to about 600,000 automated chats to date, which is a ton, especially for Montana with a population of 1 million people. So this is another way that this chatbot can be deployed. There's actually even more ways than this. We're not going to cover it in this webinar, but here's just a good example. It's embedded on the page. If you scroll down, you'll actually see some call center numbers, right? So it's the first thing you see, and it's there to deflect most of those initial inbounds. But some folks, the DMV especially, deals with a large audience, right? Some like 15-year-olds to 80-plus-year-old people, and some don't want to even touch that chatbot, and that's okay. So let's talk about the structure of it. So this was actually very simply structured. It filters the user based on the topic that they're submitting their question on. So it stays very high level global, and it asks, is it dealing with your driver's license, right? Your driver services things, your vehicle side, or a few other things that are in there, right? Just main overarching themes. And they select from there, and then it asks them to specify that topic in that global thing. So there's just 2 steps. It's just a button that they're tapping. So it's really fast for them to move through, select their answers, no NLP, selecting with a button. So it's guided. And then what happens is they enter their information, say what their issue is or their question is or whatever it may be, and that's it. What happens is the chatbot then sends a report right to the specific desk or person that answers that question. Totally automated. There's actually about 30 chatbots running behind the scenes to do this, to hit all the different desks, all the specialties. There's many in the DMV, as you can imagine. And it's sending those customer questions right to the person, so they can click on their email and respond immediately, call them up if they need to, and answer that question. And what this did for the DMV, and particularly the Vehicle Services Bureau, which was having a really tough time, they went from 2-hour call wait times to 2 minutes. And that's about an average. Sometimes they would say 20 seconds, right? That they were able to just respond to the customer and clear that queue. And this is still actually pretty, I would say, pretty basic system. It was designed almost 4 years ago. So it's still running today, handling all of their inbound customer support questions, totally automated. Hasn't been touched by a human hand in 14 months and is running flawlessly. So this is the report that those folks get when they get sent to them, and they can see a perfect layout of what the person did. There's actually a lot of different information that we can include in that, and then they can easily respond. So I went through one of my own versions of this. This isn't actually CAMI. This is my own little side project that I've built over the years. But you can see them. There's my name, my topic, my specific question I typed out, and then my information to respond. So as a rep, I could respond quickly via email. So strategies to consider on this. Well, first and foremost, it's a really good structure, but there is no NLP. So NLP on this would be a fantastic way of jumping the user quickly to submitting their information based on their issue, right? So they could be like, I'm having trouble with blah, 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 blah. Now I don't have to ask them their question again because I know what it is. As long as I can understand it, that NLP understands that, I'm like, great, what's your name? What's your phone number? What's your email? We'll get right back to you. And it's going right to the correct person. So we could streamline this process. Some folks don't want to do NLP, so they could opt into it. That's one thing that with the Secretary of State, sometimes leading with NLP up front can be tricky, right? It takes a while to grow that into a really smart system. But starting with guided upfront actually helps you structure your whole process, right? Your whole conversational flow. And then when you add NLP on the back end of that, it's already set to go anywhere in that structure, anywhere in those processes, deliver the user right to it, create a really good experience. And really, I see the future of it always being a hybrid example. So NLP with guided conversation. Like if I need to say yes or no, I'd rather tap a button. I don't want to type it. I want to tap a button. So buttons are actually fantastic ways to quickly get that user input, right? That engagement from the user, the credit they're putting in your bank. And NLP is a great way to feel more personalized and specific them, but there should be button selections after. As you saw with Secretary of State, they did have button options after that initial NLP to drive the interaction forward. That's all great. Additionally, there's actually tools out there now. This thing is running on 30 chatbots. The CAMI is running on 30 chatbots. We could actually do it all on one and do everything the same outcome, but do it on one chatbot and send emails to all of those different places based on the user intent. We can identify that user intent, the topic that it's connected to, and send it all through one chatbot. Super simple. Yeah, so that is it. That's a great breakdown. I really tried to go fast through it. I know it's a lot of information. So now we're going to open it up to questions. I don't think I have really time to show anything on the back end, but if you guys want to see, if you folks want to see the TARS builder briefly, I could absolutely jump in there. Just let me know in the Q&A or the chat. And we'll get started here. So we're going to go over to the Q&A. All three are marked answered. Are always visual or can they be voice only? So yeah, so Arnav answered that one. It's true. It's primarily visual, but there is voice elements to it, as in the chatbot can actually speak to the user. You can do text to speech through your phone, right? Or speech to text, sorry, through your phone, especially with those NLP options. But the thing to remember too is this is kind of like that button versus NLP, right? There is a hybrid solution to this, right? Because voice is very much excels at tasks, right? Simple tasks, simple, easy things where you're saying a short phrase or something and there's an action behind it. Now, not great for a chatbot, for example, reading 4 message bubbles to you in a row. Now, it's good for folks that need it as accessibility, and that option is totally available for that. But the standard user doesn't want to necessarily, or would rather opt in, I would say, for that experience versus reading their text, because you can consume text through visually much faster, right? And the chatbot is all about a really fast, clean, seamless experience. That's what it's delivering to the users, and it scales to millions of conversations concurrently. So you have that full scalability, while also scaling their time, right, to answer, right? So typically we forget that the customer's time or the citizen's time is very crucial too. And the more we can do to limit the time they spend finding answers, the happier they're going to be, the more successful the structure, the institution will be, right? The services that flow in and out of it will actually become more and more efficient, because everybody's on the same page, and they're getting there faster. Yeah, so the next question is in there, basically the same thing, right? Talking about voice. Is there any other questions? Give it a minute. If no other questions, oh, sorry, there are. Yeah, traveling mobile. Actually, there's some really interesting things with chatbots. I've explored using chatbots as for internal purposes, right, for the workforce themselves, and like logging information through a really killer interface that you can use on your phone while you're traveling or doing other things. These are great solutions, and there are some out there currently, and they're fantastic, because really all you're doing is you're looking at your processes, right? And what it takes to get through a process. There may be multiple conditions. Each person may fall into different conditions. And that's really hard to convey over static text or a form or whatever way you're trying to relay that to the user. Whereas a chatbot will actually just ask you questions and determine the conditions that apply to you in an engaging way. That's really what the DMV chatbot does for all the citizens coming in to figure out services. Just ask them questions, ask them what they're doing, what conditions apply to them specifically, and then taking them down a custom path based on their needs. It's flipping that information hierarchy, focusing on them and what they're trying to accomplish. Average cost of implementing this chatbot, how long does it normally take to implement? Great questions. The cost is actually it's incredibly affordable compared to a call center just person, right? So we start actually at a very simple SaaS pricing platform. So we'd definitely love to have a conversation with you. There is some scale based on volume, but this does start at $5,000 annually. So $5,000 annually gives you 5 chatbots. Basically everything you saw here, NLP, all of that stuff can be integrated into it. And it gives you 5,000 conversations a month. So if you need to scale up from that, the price is going to go up, but it's still, again, very, very much cheaper than just a single person. And this isn't to say that these are replacing people. They absolutely are not. This is one thing that I like to bring up a lot when talking about this, that there is a giant resource gap in government right now. That resource gap is why your employees are overwhelmed, that they're overworked, that they're stressed. They can never close that gap. They cannot scale to close that gap. Chatbots, on the other hand, can close that gap. So they can actually bring that gap down. It's what they did for the DMV. Estimated $2.5 million in customer support was delivered by that chatbot system. For for Montana, that's fantastic. 1 million people, that type of return to it. Now take that and move it over to New York, for example, or California, and the amount of people that's there that would be engaging on this. It would scale flawlessly between the two. Doesn't matter. So let's see, and then normally take to implement it. It depends on the complexity, but you can actually get a version out within a month, a pretty decent version out within a month, because it really is just you looking at your business processes, codifying them in a flow chart, which is how our builder works. It's basically just a flow chart that can branch to different outcomes, and then adding a conversational element to it. So how would you talk to this person in short snippets? So you can actually ramp up a really nice solution in a month. And then from there, you just iterate, right? You just add on, you refine your processes, your communication. And for the DMV chatbot, for example, I was the only person working on that entire project, one person. Um, and I had other duties, and I built the entire thing in 3 months, completely. And that was 30 plus chatbots, massive system, following all the processes of the DMV that the customer needs, pretty much. And then I just iterated on that as I got feedback from users. One thing we didn't talk about is the easy way that you can collect feedback from your users using a chatbot, because they're already interacting with it. Say they find their answer and you say, "How was your experience today?" And they can rate right there, give you some direct feedback. That's what I use to make the DMV chatbot run as well as it does. And like I said, this is no joke, 14 months without a human touching it. 14 months that it has operated completely autonomously. Um, if that's not, a statement for its capabilities, I don't know what is. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and jump past that. So Montana has more challenges than NY in staffing issues. This is true, definitely, but we also are looking at scale of population, right? And it's not necessarily just the people that live there, but the people that come in here. So Montana struggles with this. We have massive tourist season. We also have lots of contractors and construction folks that are funneling in that actually have to interact with the DMV. I can't remember. It's been a while since I heard numbers there, but a few years ago, it was something like 3 million title transactions occurred. So 3 million out of a million people, there's definitely an influx happening here, but they do have a lot more challenges to staffing. I will definitely admit that their call center at the DMV is like 6 people. Not uh, easy to match to the amount of folks here. Does the chatbot oftentimes funnel a tough question to a human? Yes, it can. This is actually, we can do this through Zendesk. So you can think of TAR as like a marketplace, right? So it's almost like that website feel where you can plug in different things. So we can actually plug into Zendesk, not only to answer or hand off the user to live chat with a human, but also to automate that entire ticketing process. You don't actually have to do it manually anymore. The chatbot can take that customer, intake them, ask them all the pertinent questions, and get all the relevant information they need to generate, and then automatically generate a ticket through Zendesk and other ticketing solutions as well. But Zendesk in particular is just a fantastic solution. I know a lot of public sector organizations use it, and you can actually combine those two for a full conversational deployment, right? So that's automated and live, working together to give really relevant support to your customers. And when your folks are out of the office and live chat isn't available, the chatbot can then just work through the intake process, right? Of asking their question, ticketing it for them, or just asking the question and sending it to that support center for when they return, right? If they're not, and then when they come back, they can answer that question. So,
hey, sorry, this is
this the
over here. Just to pipe in really quick, I just dropped a link to the webinar we hosted about the Zendesk integration in the chat. So if you want to learn more about that, be sure to check out that link. It is in the chat and you should have access to it.
Absolutely. Yep. We have a ton of resources out there on these webinars, so feel free to take a look at them all. There's so much out there, so many possibilities. Is this the only public sector webinar you're hosting, or is there more to it? Yeah, absolutely. So every Friday now, moving forward into the foreseeable future, you're going to have public sector focused webinars. So next week is actually going to focus on the IT department and how IT departments specifically can deflect tickets and requests for help using chatbots. So we're going to look at not really an active deployment, but a deployment we put together, a chatbot, demo chatbot, if you will, for Montana State University's IT department. And we actually built this entire thing just looking at their website and their PDFs, it was tough to do. Arnav is actually did a lot of that work. And we turned it into a chatbot experience where you could type out what you needed to do, or you could guide through options and learn how to put your email on your phone or set it all up, all of those fun things. A very common question or request that IT departments get, and I'm sure they just absolutely are sick of hearing for another person asking to help them set up their email. So the chatbot can handle that. So that's next week. And then from there, we're going to actually be having folks on from other either public sector organizations or other GovTech companies. We're going to just talk about different ways of utilizing automation, AI, things of that nature, and expose you to a whole lot of other opportunities out there and ways of thinking about approaching government, public sector in general, and ways to scale your services to meet those demands and really start delivering a customer-centric experience that pays massive dividends all around in time, money, efficiency to the process. So it'll be a great time. All right, looks like there are no more questions. We're coming up on that top of the hour. I want to make sure to respect everybody's time and not go over. So if there are no more questions, I will go ahead and move to this last slide, which just has how you can contact us. All right. There's a phone number there. Feel free to call that. You can also send me an email, levi@hellotars, or you can go check out our website, hellotars.com. We have, you can actually even sign up right then and there for a free trial, 14-day, and try the builder out. See what it's like to build a chatbot. Go for it. You have nothing to lose. It's fun, it's engaging, and it's like building a flowchart. Everybody's done it. Everybody's built a flowchart, so you can definitely build a chatbot. So yeah, go check it out. Let us know if you're interested in strategies for implementing chatbots in the future, or would actually like to do it. So with that, thank you all for joining me. It's been great. I'm so excited to share some of my insights over the last 4 years of automating customer support through chatbots in the public sector. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you next time.